if the modern systems you navigate every single day, and I mean, literally the entire architecture of our society, from marriage and family courts to your corporate HR department, all the way down to academia, what if they are just broken?
Right.
Like, what if they are actually functioning exactly as designed just to, systematically extract your resources?
It's honestly a chilling premise because, I mean, we have this deeply ingrained habit of viewing our institutions as these like neutral arbiters,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Blind justice and all that.
Exactly. We just assume the legal system, the workplace, the classroom, that they're all built on this foundation of blind fairness. But when you strip away the idealistic rhetoric and examine these structures through a strictly evolutionary and economic lens, like we're doing today, a very different, much darker architecture starts to emerge.
It really does. It fundamentally changes how you view the world around you. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are super thrilled you're here with us.
Yes, welcome.
And before we pull the thread on this massive, massive topic, please remember to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss one of these explorations. Because today, we are undertaking a really comprehensive review of this wildly controversial, just viral new ebook that has been absolutely dominating the cultural conversation.
It's everywhere right now.
It really is. And seriously, to read along with us or to get the full unedited experience of what we're about to discuss, because the raw data inside this thing is just staggering. I highly urge you guys to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books and buy this book right now.
You're definitely going to want to see these numbers for yourself. So the source material we are unpacking today is Conrad Reicher's 2025 ebook, and it's titled Escape the Self-Centered Trap: Unlocking the Secrets of Emotionally Balanced Relationship.
Okay, we have to talk about the incredible irony of that title immediately, right?
Yeah,
Because Unlocking the Secrets of Emotionally Balanced Relationships sounds exactly like, I don't know, a soft, pastel-colored couples therapy workbook.
Oh, yeah, like something you'd pick up at a holistic wellness retreat in Sedona or something.
Exactly. But it's entirely a Trojan horse.
Completely. I mean, the cover might belong in the self-help aisle, but the text itself is this hardcore, explosive tactical manual. It is written explicitly for men in the manosphere, the men's rights movement, and really just men looking to understand the historical architecture of our institutions before they were, and this is Reicher's own phrasing captured by feminists and Marxists.
Right. And our mission today is to thoroughly unpack Reicher's central claims about that institutional capture. Like how these systems are purportedly designed to drain male productivity and, most importantly, the radical ways men are responding to it right now.
And just a quick note, for those of you who want to follow the author's ongoing strategies and his real-time cultural commentary, you could definitely go follow at Conrad Reicher on Substack.
At Conrad Reicher on Substack. Now, setting the stage for this deep dive, we need to be very, very clear with you guys about our role here today.
Yes, absolutely.
This book contains highly politically charged content. I mean, it fiercely criticizes modern feminism, the justice system, huge sweeping societal structures. Our goal today is not to take sides. We aren't endorsing Reicher's viewpoints, and we aren't condemning them either.
Right, we are just the messengers here.
Exactly. Our objective is to impartially report on the contents of this ebook. We're going to convey the ideas, the specific anecdotes, and the data exactly as Reicher presents them, basically serving as your objective guides through some incredibly intense and provocative material. We're just analyzing the architecture of his argument.
And that synthesis, it really starts with this foundational premise that basically underpins every subsequent chapter in his book. It's the assertion that modern relationships are not driven by romance or soulmates or serendipity. Reicher argues they are driven just ruthlessly and subconsciously by evolutionary biology.
Yeah, he argues that men are essentially participating in this rigged biological marketplace without even knowing the rules of the game. And he introduces this concept of the dual mating strategy, which that really caught my attention.
Yeah, it's a fascinating framework.
It is. The idea is that women, driven by hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary hardwiring, they seek two distinct things for survival that very rarely exist in the same man. Like, they seek genetic fitness, the raw, dominant traits of what he calls alphas, but they also desperately need to secure long-term resources and stability, which they historically extract from betas.
Right. And to really understand the mechanism behind this, Reicher asks us to look back at our ancestral environment, like out on the savannah. In a hunter-gatherer society, a woman faced immense metabolic costs and physical vulnerability during pregnancy and child-rearing.
Oh, for sure. It was life or death.
Literally. So she needed the absolute best genes to ensure her offspring survived disease and physical threats, and that's the alpha preference. But she also needed a guaranteed flow of calories and protection over a very long period.
Right, someone to actually build the shelter and bring back the food.
Exactly. And the hyper-aggressive dominant males who provide the best genes are, often volatile and pretty poor long-term providers. Meanwhile, the more docile, cooperative males make excellent long-term providers, but they might lack that aggressive genetic edge. So Riker argues that the female brain evolved to solve this by seeking both, often from different sources, which leads to this covert biological operation.
Looking at this through a modern lens, it feels less to me like a dating pool and more like a venture capital firm treating startup founders.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it.
Right. Like, think about how a VC firm operates. They mitigate their risk by investing heavily in safe, boring, low-yield index funds or established corporate structures. And that's your beta provider in this scenario. He keeps the firm stable, he pays the overhead.
He's the safety net.
Exactly. But the VC also takes a specialized portion of their capital and takes wild, high-risk swings on incredibly volatile tech startups, hoping for that crazy unicorn payout.
Yeah.
And that's the alpha genetic material. So Riker is essentially arguing that women are diversifying their biological portfolios and men are just these unaware, disposable assets in the portfolio.
That is a highly accurate parallel to Riker's thesis, and he brings receipts to back up this venture capital approach to mating. He cites a 2023 Psychology Today study stating that 65% of women rate raw confidence over income when evaluating immediate physical attraction.
Wow, 65%.
Yeah. And he pairs this with data from the Kinsey Institute showing that 68% of women admit to lying about their sexual past.
That's a huge number.
It is. And Riker uses these data points to argue that the biological imperative actually requires masking the strategy. Because if the beta provider realizes he is merely the safe index fund and not the primary object of raw desire, the resource flow stops.
And he figures it out and walks away. And Riker anchors this with some truly visceral anecdotes. Like, the one that stands out to me the most is Dr. Michael. Here's a guy earning $450,000 a year as an OBGYN. He literally delivers babies for a living.
Right, the ultimate beta provider on paper.
Exactly. Stable, incredibly wealthy, high status, highly educated. Yet, he discovers he is raising a child that his wife had with a local UFC fighter. And Riker doesn't just mention this in passing. He profiles the fighter. The guy drives a 1998 Honda Civic. He has cauliflower ear, absolutely no savings, but he possesses that raw Darwinian fitness, the physical dominance.
And Riker uses Dr. Michael to explain the psychology of the beta provider here. Modern society tells men like Dr. Michael that if they study hard, follow the rules, earn a high income, and display emotional availability, they will win the mating game.
The nice guy finishes first narrative.
Right. But Riker argues this is a deliberate societal deception designed just to keep men producing infrastructure. When Dr. Michael's wife chose the UFC fighter for genetics and the doctor for resources, she was perfectly executing the dual mating strategy.
Which brings us to what Riker calls the Cuckoldry Economy. The idea that beta males are unknowingly bankrolling alpha behavior on a massive macroeconomic scale. And the stat he uses to illustrate this is genuinely jaw-dropping.
Oh, the billboard.
Yeah, he points to this vasectomy reversal clinic in Texas that put up a billboard reading, "Trust but verify." And the context here, Riker notes that 42% of this clinic's clients discovered they were raising another man's kids when they went in for routine pre-op blood work. 42%.
It's wild. Though it's important to look at the methodology and the implications of that number, right? While the sample size is specifically men seeking vasectomy reversals, which, might skew the data slightly, Riker uses it to highlight this concept of paternal discrepancy.
Right.
In our ancestral past, males developed intense psychological mechanisms to ensure paternity certainty, because the evolutionary cost of raising another man's child is absolute genetic death. It's an evolutionary dead end.
Yeah, all your resources go into a rival's DNA.
Exactly. And Riker argues that modern society actively suppresses men's natural instincts to demand that paternity certainty, basically labeling such demands as controlling or insecure.
And he traces how this biological reality has been entirely normalized by modern pop culture, too. He takes Twilight, a billion-dollar franchise, and strips away the supernatural romance stuff to look at the underlying archetypes.
This was such a fascinating breakdown.
It really was. So Bella Swan emotionally cuckolded Edward, the vampire. And Edward represents the ultimate wealthy, safe, eternal, aristocratic provider. He has infinite resources and infinite patience. but she's inexplicably drawn to Jacob the werewolf, who literally represents raw, shirtless, animalistic, volatile fitness.
Right, the alpha.
Yeah. And Riker argues that millions of women didn't flock to Twilight for the vampires. They flocked to it because it perfectly mirrored their deepest evolutionary mating strategy.
And if you apply that evolutionary psychology to the dating apps you guys swipe through every day, it reframes the entire experience. When a man builds a Tinder profile highlighting his job, his house, and his stability, Riker argues he's advertising himself as the safe bond, inadvertently placing himself squarely in the beta category.
Just begging to be the index fund.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the men displaying raw physical dominance and risk-taking behavior, they're capturing the alpha genetic preference. So Riker's point is that the digital mating market is hyper-efficient, and it's accelerating this dual strategy to totally unprecedented levels.
But, if dating is the biological stock market, Riker argues that marriage is the corporate merger. And he believes it is a merger where the legal architecture is uniquely, deliberately designed for men to lose absolutely everything.
Yes.
Like if the corporate world and the dating apps are the arenas where this resource extraction happens casually, marriage is where it becomes officially institutionalized by the state.
And Riker refers to this as the marriage plantation and the divorce industrial complex. He completely rejects the idea of modern marriage as a romantic partnership. Instead, he views it as an extractive industry.
A rigged carnival game.
Pretty much. His core argument here centers on the legal shift that occurred with the introduction of no-fault divorce laws back in the 1970s. Prior to no-fault divorce, breaking the marriage contract required proving a breach, right? Like infidelity, abuse, abandonment.
You actually needed a reason.
Right. But no-fault divorce allowed either party to dissolve the contract for any reason or literally no reason at all.
And Riker argues that this didn't just make divorce easier, it fundamentally inverted the entire power dynamic. He points out that marriage is the only contract in Western law where you are financially rewarded for breaking the terms of the agreement.
Which is a crazy way to think about it.
It is. And the financial data he pulls to support this is terrifying if you're a high-earning man. He cites Ford's data claiming that wives take 97% of marital assets in the 80% of divorces that they initiate.
Unbelievable.
Think about that mechanism. If you initiate the dissolution of a corporate merger because you're simply bored, you don't get to take 97% of the combined intellectual property. But in family court, Riker says, you do.
And the extraction goes way beyond just liquid assets, too. It involves the deliberate transfer of debt. Riker points to a Federal Reserve statistic showing that 58% of divorced men discover their exes maxed out joint credit cards in the months immediately preceding the divorce filing.
So they plan it out.
Yeah, and the legal mechanism here is crucial. Because those debts were incurred during the marriage, the family court often splits them evenly or even assigns them to the higher earner, which is usually the man. So the man is not only losing his savings, he is actively paying off the debt used to fund his partner's exit strategy.
And he backs these systemic claims up with these stories from guys on the ground. Take John, a mechanic in Florida. John is currently sleeping in his '98 Dodge Ram in a Walmart parking lot. Why? Because the family court ordered him to pay $2,500 a month in alimony.
And the justification for that alimony is just...
It's insane. Riker dives into the why. The court deemed it necessary so his ex-wife could maintain her, quote, standard of living, which apparently involved a comprehensive self-care routine while she runs some spiritual wellness business that operates at a massive loss.
Right. And the standard of living precedent is one that Riker attacks viciously in the book. Historically, alimony was designed to keep destitute women off state welfare. But Riker argues that modern family courts have mutated this concept into a lifelong pension plan based on peak earning years.
If you have one good year, you're screwed.
Exactly. If John the mechanic worked 80-hour weeks with massive overtime during the final 2 years of the marriage, the court calculates his alimony based on that unsustainable peak. When he inevitably burns out or loses the overtime, the alimony doesn't adjust downward automatically. He is trapped, facing literal jail time for contempt of court if he misses a payment.
Wow. And then there's Dave, the Google engineer, who illustrates what Riker calls the financial cuckold. So Dave is a brilliant guy, top of his field. He pays $15,000 to send his girlfriend on a soul-searching yoga retreat in Bali.
Oh, this story.
Yeah, and a few weeks later, he gets FaceTimed by her from a bamboo hut sitting next to a heavily tattooed breathwork coach. Riker argues that women has weaponized the modern therapeutic language of emotional labor and self-discovery to justify this exact kind of behavior.
And it's the legal system's adoption of this therapeutic language that Riker finds most alarming. He cites cases in California where judges classified a wife's OnlyFans subscription as entrepreneurial therapy, forcing the husband to subsidize it during the separation.
You're kidding.
I wish I was. Or the case of a Texas engineer who was ordered to pay $200,000 annually because his ex-wife's legal team successfully argued that her daily Starbucks pumpkin spice lattes and luxury spa visits were necessary medical treatments for the PTSD she allegedly contracted from the stress of their marriage.
Okay, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Because Riker's painting all marriages as these hostile corporate takeovers just waiting for the activation code.
Right.
But does his data actually account for the marriages that succeed? I mean, there are millions of stable, lifelong marriages out there. Is he exclusively focusing on the catastrophic, worst-case scenario failures to build his theory of a divorce industrial complex?
It's a really vital counterpoint, and Riker does address this exact critique by focusing on the incentives rather than the exceptions. His argument is that the system itself incentivizes these catastrophic failures. He doesn't deny that successful marriages exist. He argues that they exist in spite of the legal structure, not because of it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and he delves into the municipal economics of family court to explain this. Family court judges are often elected officials, right? They rely heavily on campaign contributions from local family law firms.
So it's basically a closed-loop economy.
Exactly. The more conflict generated in a divorce, the more billable hours for the lawyers. The more billable hours, the more revenue flows back into the campaign coffers of the judges. Riker asserts that the legal system has successfully turned male productivity and that biological impulse to provide for a family into a self-sustaining municipal revenue stream.
A swift, amicable divorce doesn't pay for the judge's re-election campaign.
Precisely. A drawn-out, vicious custody battle over standard of living and emotional distress generates hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Man. And if the courts are the mechanism for extracting your physical wealth, Riker argues the extraction doesn't stop there at all. Once they take the house and the paycheck, the next target is your public reputation and your career.
Yeah, the social extraction.
Right. Which leads us into his analysis of the weaponization of victimhood and what he calls the modern witch trials.
This section of the book is particularly intense because Riker claims that modern institutions, specifically academia and corporate HR departments, have been entirely captured by feminist ideology. He argues they now operate with the exact same hysteria, reliance on spectral evidence, and lack of due process as the 17th century Salem witch trials.
He starts by deconstructing the concept of toxic masculinity. Riker argues this is just a manufactured myth designed to shame natural male strength, competitiveness, and risk-taking. Meanwhile, he points out that toxic femininity is completely ignored by these exact same institutions.
And he defines toxic femininity as the weaponization of incompetence and victimhood to control men and resources.
Yes, and to illustrate the weaponization of incompetence, he points to a massive cultural phenomenon right now, handless girl syndrome.
Oh, the TikTok trend.
Yeah, if you look at TikTok, there's a trend involving millions of videos where women pretend to be completely helpless. They lip sync audio like, I'm just a girl.
Yeah.
While fake struggling to open a pickle jar or change a tire or unclog a sink. And Riker doesn't see this as a cute joke. He compares it directly to Victorian-era fainting couches.
It's a fascinating historical parallel, really. He points out that our grandmothers survived the Great Depression. They worked in munitions factories during World War II and could lace corsets that would survive a hurricane. Yet modern, highly educated women are producing content pretending they don't have the hand strength to pump their own gas.
Right.
Riker argues this is a calculated evolutionary trigger. By feigning helplessness, they activate the male biological protective instinct, forcing men to perform the mundane, dirty, or dangerous labor for them, all while maintaining plausible deniability of their own agency.
And while a TikTok trend seems trivial on the surface, Riker argues it scales up to devastating systemic consequences when that same feigned vulnerability is introduced into the legal and corporate spheres.
Absolutely.
He brings in Department of Justice statistics, stating that 72% of fake abuse claims come from women. He dives into the specific mechanisms of Title IX on college campuses, citing data that 1 in 10 Title IX complaints are provably false.
Which is a huge margin of error for a system that destroys lives.
Exactly. And perhaps most damning to the justice system, he points to Innocence Project data showing that 83% of false accusers face absolutely zero legal consequences for lying.
And that lack of consequences is what creates the asymmetry. Let's look at the campus anecdotes he shares, because if you are a young guy in college right now listening to this, the architecture of these tribunals is terrifying.
Oh, the Duke case.
Yeah, he details the case of a male student at Duke University who was expelled over an accusation made during a bad breakup. What makes this case staggering is the actual evidence. Texts surfaced where the girl actively bragged to her friends about ruining him because he broke up with her.
She literally put it in writing.
She did. But the university's Title IX tribunal, which operates under a preponderance of evidence standard rather than beyond a reasonable doubt, they just ignored the texts. They kept his $200,000 tuition and permanently expelled him.
It's just wild. And Riker explains why the universities act this way, right?
Yeah. Following the 2011 Dear Colleague letter from the Department of Education, universities were threatened with the loss of federal funding if they didn't aggressively prosecute sexual misconduct. So, to protect their funding, universities essentially created kangaroo courts. They're staffed by administrators who also act as investigators, judges, and juries.
All in one.
Exactly. Riker argues this structure guarantees the conviction of men just to satisfy federal quotas and protect the university's endowment, completely sacrificing male students' due process.
He also mentions a Yale professor who was suspended for, quote, prolonged eye contact during office hours.
This one is just surreal.
Yeah. The student claimed his gaze made her feel unsafe. But when the university reviewed the video evidence from the office, it showed the man was just blinking normally while listening to her speak.
He was just blinking.
Literally just blinking. But the administration argued that the student's perception of unsafety was more important than objective reality. His career was ash before he could even mount a defense. Riker argues that universities have swapped out the Puritans, who used to burn scandalous novels for modern HR departments that enforce bubble wrap on human interaction.
And this leads to the defensive tactics men are forced to adopt. Riker introduces a concept he calls the rule of thumb drive. We are all familiar with the archaic, horrific 1800s rule of thumb regarding physical abuse, right?
Right.
Well, Riker says today's men have to practice the rule of thumb drive, meaning they have to secretly record and back up audio evidence of their partner's violent tantrums or erratic behavior on a hidden hard drive.
And why do they have to do this? Like, legally speaking.
Because of the legal architecture of family court and domestic disputes, Riker explains how ex parte orders work. An ex parte order is a temporary restraining order granted by a judge based solely on the testimony of one party, without the other party even present.
No chance to defend yourself.
None. A woman can go to a judge, claim she feels threatened, and within hours, a man can be legally evicted from a home he owns, separated from his children, and stripped of his firearms, all without ever having a chance to defend himself in court. Riker argues the rule of thumb drive is the only defense mechanism men have against this shifting burden of proof.
I really want to dig into the evolutionary connection here too, because this is where Riker's synthesis gets really dark. He references an anthropologist, Dr. Stone, who observed that female chimpanzees will fling feces at their rivals to assert dominance, while human females use social sabotage. So how does Riker argue that modern HR departments have essentially formalized this biological imperative of female gossip into corporate law?
It's a brilliant, albeit controversial, tracing of the biology of reputation destruction. In our ancestral past, physical combat was incredibly risky for women. A physical injury could mean death or the inability to care for offspring. Therefore, female intrasexual competition evolved into covert social sabotage.
Whisper networks.
Exactly. Instead of fighting a rival, an ancestral woman would spread rumors to ruin the rival's reputation, ultimately aiming to get them exiled from the tribe and its resources. Riker argues that today's corporate HR departments and university Title IX tribunals have institutionalized this exact primitive biological mechanism.
So a hashtag or a vague complaint to HR about a microaggression serves the exact same function as a village rumor.
Precisely. But the modern difference is that the village rumor now carries the full backing of corporate policy and state law. Riker calls this productivity parasitism. He defines it as corporate bureaucracies, which he notes are often staffed heavily by gender studies or sociology graduates that drain corporate resources, enforce ideological compliance, and contribute absolutely no tangible value, revenue, or infrastructure to the company.
They just police behavior.
They exist solely to police behavior and wield the power of exile.
I mean, if you guys are listening to this on your commute or at your desk, just think about your own company's org chart for a second. How many departments exist solely to manage compliance, language, and culture versus the departments actually engineering the product or generating revenue.
It's a huge shift.
Riker describes these compliance bureaucracies as the intestinal worms of capitalism, silently draining the host's vitality. But, if the corporate world and the courts are the arenas where this resource extraction and behavioral policing peak, we have to ask where the conditioning actually begins.
Right, it doesn't just start at age 25.
Exactly. Riker doesn't think men just wake up one day and accept this architecture. He argues they're being systematically broken in long before they even reach puberty.
And that transitions us into his really scathing critique of the anti-male education system. Riker argues that the modern classroom is explicitly designed to pathologize natural male behavior from the very moment young boys step into kindergarten.
The analogy that came to mind reading this chapter is like taking a wild husky, a dog bred over centuries for endurance, for surviving the freezing cold, for pulling massive sleds across the tundra, and forcing it to live in a 400 square foot studio apartment in a crowded city.
Oh, that's perfect.
Right. And when the dog inevitably gets anxious, paces around, and chews up the sofa, the owner punishes the dog for being disobedient. But the dog isn't broken, the environment is. The system punishes the dog for its nature, instead of recognizing that it failed to give the dog a sled to pull.
That is the perfect encapsulation of Riker's argument regarding boys in schools. And the historical context here is vital. Up until the mid-19th century, education was largely kinesthetic, apprentice-based, and heavily male-dominated.
Very hands-on.
Exactly. But as education became formalized and heavily feminized in its teaching staff, the pedagogical model shifted to rote memorization, sitting perfectly still at a desk for 8 hours, and strict verbal compliance. This environment is diametrically opposed to male neurodevelopment.
Because boys need to move.
Yes. Boys' brains are flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine through physical movement, risk-taking, and competition.
And he illustrates this with the story of an 8-year-old boy named Timmy. Timmy gets suspended for playing tag too aggressively at recess. The school administration is texting his parents about his, quote, toxic disruptive behavior. His actual crime. He was laughing too loud and running too fast.
It's absurd.
It is. And the school's solution isn't to give him more recess, it's a prescription pad.
Right. Riker points out that the CDC reports 80% of all ADHD diagnoses target boys. He calls this risk deficiency disorder. He argues that what we are calling ADHD in millions of young boys is not a neurological defect, but a natural biological exuberance that the school system finds inconvenient. So the system treats it with Adderall, which is an amphetamine, to force docility and compliance.
And the bias isn't just behavioral, it's academic. Riker cites this highly controversial 2019 University of Bristol study. The researchers took identical essays and had them graded by teachers. When female teachers believed the essay was written by a boy, they graded it 15% lower than when they believed the exact same essay was written by a girl.
Wow.
The system actively penalizes boys not for their work, but for their gender.
And when those boys grow up conditioned by a system that medicates their energy and downgrades their achievements, they graduate into what Riker calls the Atlas complex. They enter adulthood expected to carry the silent load of civilization. Just like Atlas holding up the sky, their labor is foundational, but entirely invisible and unappreciated.
And the data he brings in to validate this Atlas complex is brutal. OSHA reports that 94% of all workplace deaths are men. The men climbing the cell towers in freezing rain, the men maintaining the high-voltage power lines, the men deep-sea welding the internet cables. They build the literal infrastructure of the world, yet society treats them as disposable.
And the psychological toll of this disposability is staggering. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention notes that male suicides are 3.5 times higher than women's.
This is where Riker takes direct aim at modern therapy culture, too. The prevailing societal advice for struggling men right now is share more, be vulnerable, cry it out.
Right, talk about your feelings.
Yeah, but Riker argues this is catastrophic advice for men. He delves into neuroscience, arguing that male prefrontal cortexes are biologically wired for spatial reasoning, problem solving, and delayed gratification. He cites a Harvard study claiming that men's spatial IQ is on average 12 points higher than women's.
His point is that when a bridge collapses, telling a man to journal about his feelings doesn't fix the bridge. Men derive their self-worth from competence, from building, from fixing the bridge.
What's that?
And if we connect this to the broader societal picture, Riker identifies a breaking point he calls the Sisyphus threshold. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus was cursed to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down. Riker defines the Sisyphus threshold as the exact moment where the immense weight of societal expectations on men to be the protectors, the providers, the stoic performers completely outweighs any perceived purpose, respect, or reward they receive in return.
And when a man hits that Sisyphus threshold, he doesn't go to a therapist to talk about it, he just checks out.
Yes. Riker argues this threshold is the root cause of the deaths of despair, the skyrocketing rates of suicides, opioid overdoses, and alcohol-related liver diseases tracking among middle-aged men right now. They look at the legal system that can take their kids, the HR departments that can erase their careers, and the culture that mocks their nature, and they simply drop the boulder.
But Riker argues this suppression of masculinity isn't just a byproduct of legal and behavioral conditioning. He asserts it is being actively and deliberately engineered at a biological and cultural level. Which brings us to the forces shaping our physical bodies and our minds. The estrogen economy, the media, and the virginity hoax.
Yeah, Riker goes aggressively after modern dietary guidelines and pop culture algorithms here, arguing they are manipulated to physically weaken men, drop their testosterone, and monetarily exploit their resulting insecurity. Let's start with what he calls the estrogen economy.
Okay.
Riker squarely blames the massive global rise of soy lattes, veganism, and plant-based diets for the well-documented global plummet in male sperm counts.
He has a line in the book that is impossible to forget, honestly. He says, every soy latte you drink makes Karl Marx smile in his grave.
It's a very vivid image.
Right, and he points to historical dietary norms, claiming that ancient Spartan warriors and NASA's 1950s Apollo astronauts ate heavy, dense meat diets, salted beef, bone broth, not quinoa bowls, and seed oils.
And he backs this up with nutritional science, citing the Asian Journal of Andrology, which published findings that heavy soy-consuming populations have a 19% higher rate of andropause. Andropause is essentially male menopause, a drastic premature drop in testosterone leading to lethargy, muscle loss, and depression. Riker argues that dietary cholesterol and animal fats are the fundamental building blocks for neuromyelination and testosterone production.
Now, I have to pause here and push back on the framing just a bit. Is Riker suggesting a literal smoke-filled room biochemical conspiracy orchestrated by the government via chickpeas? Or is he using the soy latte as a potent cultural metaphor for a broader societal softening of men?
It's really a synthesis of both. He firmly believed the nutritional science regarding endocrine disruptors in modern processed food and plastics is real and damaging. But he also uses soy as a pejorative shorthand for compliance. He points out that the $25 billion plant-based food industry actively funds many of the same academic institutions and gender studies departments that push anti-male rhetoric. In Riker's view, it is a symbiotic loop. If you weaken the men biologically, physically lowering their testosterone and drive, they become significantly easier to subjugate culturally and politically.
And that cultural subjugation is being pumped directly into our living rooms through what he terms the matriarchal media complex. He draws a really sharp contrast between the media of the past and present. Like he looks at the unapologetic, cigar-chomping, muscular masculinity of Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone in the 1980s.
Terminator, Predator.
Exactly.
Yep.
Those characters went through brutal heroes' journeys. They bled, they failed, and they overcame. Now, he says, Hollywood is dominated by the Mary Sue trend.
And a Mary Sue is a literary trope for a character, usually female, who is inexplicably perfect at everything with no training, no struggle, and no flaws. Riker points to characters like Brie Larson's Captain Marvel or the recent iterations of Star Wars.
All right.
Yeah. These characters don't train, they just scowl at the incompetent men around them and instantly unlock godlike powers. Riker argues this media is designed to rewrite the cultural script, portraying men as either malicious oppressors or bumbling fools who need to step aside for female greatness.
But what really fascinates me is the financial cognitive dissonance he points out in this strategy. He cites Variety data showing that globally, male-led traditional action films still gross 37% more than these hyper-feminized reboots. Yet, major studios continue to push this estrogen blockbuster formula, willing to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. Why?
Well, Riker argues it's because the executive class in Hollywood has been completely captured by feminist ideology. He claims they are weaponizing male guilt like emotional ransomware. They are willing to prioritize social engineering and the humiliation of male archetypes over actual box office returns, essentially burning shareholder capital to maintain ideological dominance.
Which brings us to perhaps his most controversial, deeply biological, cultural critique in the entire book, the virginity hoax. Riker argues vehemently against the modern normalization of casual sex, hookup culture, and high body counts for women. He says men are being aggressively gaslit by the media to ignore their innate biological disgust at promiscuity.
He relies heavily on evolutionary psychology here. For men, pair bonding and paternity certainty are deeply intertwined. A woman with a history of high promiscuity signals, on a primal level, a high risk of cuckoldry.
Right, going back to what we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Modern media tells men that caring about a partner's past makes them insecure or misogynistic. But Riker counters with cold data. He cites a study from the Journal of Economic Behavior claiming that women with 0 to 1 sexual partners in their past earn 18% more than their highly active peers, suggesting a correlation between low promiscuity and high impulse control or future orientation.
And the data he pulls on marriage stability is what really anchors his point. He quotes a 2023 Oslo University study tracking long-term marriage outcomes. The study showed a staggering 79% divorce rate for wives who had 15 or more past sexual partners.
79%.
Yeah. Compare that to a divorce rate of just 23% for women with 0 to 2 past partners. Riker argues that high promiscuity damages the neurochemical ability to pair bond, specifically the oxytocin and vasopressin receptors, making long-term stable marriage biochemically nearly impossible for those individuals.
He is telling men that their biological disgust isn't a social construct, it is an evolutionary alarm system designed to protect them from a high-risk investment.
So if you look at all of this, if the family courts are designed to extract your wealth, if HR departments are weaponized witch trials, if the schools medicate your nature, and if the media and food supply are actively hostile to your biology, it begs the ultimate question: what is the rational response?
Right, what do you actually do?
Because Riker doesn't just spend 300 pages complaining, he pivots into a hardcore tactical field manual for opting out.
Exactly. This is the actionable phase of Riker's manifesto, and it starts with the most fundamental withdrawal of resources imaginable, what he calls the male sexual strike, or in internet parlance, the nut rebellion. He argues that men are simply, quietly walking away from the dating market entirely.
The examples he uses to illustrate this strike are surreal, yet entirely real. Look at Japan. In Japan, hyper-realistic $50,000 companion dolls are literally outselling Tesla Cybertrucks. Men are dropping the equivalent of luxury car money on silicone. Plainhoff and Riker quotes one of the buyers. She listens, she doesn't age, and she doesn't sue me for half my company.
And in America, the data is equally stark. The Kinsey Institute reports that 58% of Generation Z men now rank pornography and digital AI companions as their primary sexual outlet, placing it above the pursuit of actual human relationships. Furthermore, the World Health Organization notes that sperm bank donations have plummeted 55% globally since 2020.
Riker interprets this not as a tragic epidemic of loneliness, but as a deliberate siege. He calls it the seed siege. Men realize the juice isn't worth the squeeze, so they are hoarding their genetic capital. But for the men who do want families, who want to build a legacy, Riker points to the massive rise of the tradcons, the traditional conservatives.
The tradcons represent an active rebellion against the modern state. These are men who have recognized the institutional capture and have decided to build completely outside of it. They are moving out of progressive cities and relocating to red states or rural areas. They are building off-grid homesteads, hoarding physical silver and Bitcoin, entirely bypassing the public school system by homeschooling their kids and having massive families of 6, 7, or 8 children.
It's demographic defiance. And while the birth rates in secular progressive cities plummet below replacement levels, the tradcons are attempting to literally outbreed the system.
But what about the men who are already caught in the system, or who want to protect the wealth they're generating right now? For them, Riker outlines the Phoenix Protocol. This is where the book turns into a hardcore financial thriller. Forbes tracked a 3,000% spike in American men setting up offshore asset protection trusts, or OAPTs, in jurisdictions like the Cook Islands or Nevis.
And Riker makes it crystal clear. They aren't setting these up to dodge the IRS. They are setting them up to dodge family court and alimony. The Cook Islands, for example, do not recognize U.S. court orders. If a U.S. family court judge orders a man to hand over $5 million to his ex-wife, and that money is in a Cook Islands trust, the judge has zero jurisdictional power to compel the foreign trustee to release the funds.
Checkmate.
Men are legally firewalling their life's work from the divorce industrial complex.
Beyond offshore trusts, men are moving to cash-only manual labor jobs to artificially lower their reported income. or they are hiding all their wealth in cold storage crypto wallets. Riker tells the fascinating story of MGTRW Mike men going their own way. Mike was a senior developer in Silicon Valley. He saw the writing on the wall, liquidated his entire stock portfolio, and bought 40 acres of agricultural land in Paraguay.
Good for Mike.
He now makes $12,000 a month growing and exporting cacao. Mike's exact quote in the book is, "No U.S. family court judge can seize what they can't map on Google Earth."
I love that quote. Riker also details lawyers in Nevada who are setting up bachelor LLCs. They are using 1870s Homestead Act loopholes, legally registering tech millionaires as cattle ranchers to shield their Bitcoin from marital asset division. It is a massive, coordinated capital flight.
And it all ties back to Riker's profound respect for blue-collar competence. He highlights the story of Dave, a high school dropout turned master electrician. Dave was hired as an independent contractor to rewire the server room for a university's gender studies department, the exact people who theoretically despise him.
Oh, this is great.
Dave billed them $300 an hour, and they had to pay it because without his physical competence, their entire digital world goes dark.
Riker uses Dave to prove a massive point. Tangible, physical, blue-collar competence will always beat academic, bureaucratic compliance when the lights actually go out.
But we have to analyze the endgame here. Riker calls this a strike and a siege. If the most competent, high IQ, capable men in society are essentially pulling a digital John Galt referencing Atlas Shrugged and taking their money, their genetics, and their labor entirely off the grid, is Riker advocating for the total apocalyptic collapse of Western civilization, or is he just trying to starve the gynocratic state until it is forced to renegotiate the social contract and the terms of marriage?
That is the crux of the entire manifesto. Riker's advocating for the construction of parallel economies. He believes that by weaponizing the lone wolf advantage, men can drain the tax base. Every single man who incorporates in Belize, who hides his wealth in a Ledger hardware wallet, or who simply refuses to marry and pay into the alimony system, starves the beast of municipal revenue.
Right.
Whether that starvation leads to a peaceful renegotiation of laws or a total systemic collapse, Riker seems to suggest that either outcome is highly preferable to the current state of indentured servitude.
Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked today. Riker's Escape the Self-Centered Trap is, without a doubt, a fierce, uncompromising, and deeply polarizing manifesto. Through his evolutionary lens, we are looking at a world where men's natural biological instincts are systematically criminalized, where their wallets are legally plundered by the state, and where the only viable, rational response is a ruthless return to physical competence, extreme financial detachment, and biological realism.
It is a dark, highly contentious view of modern civilization. But we have to acknowledge that it is undeniably resonating with millions of men worldwide who feel the invisible, crushing weight of that Sisyphus threshold.
And that brings us to the close of today's deep dive. Once again, please remember to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the ideas and books actively shaping the underground culture.
And if this exploration hooked you guys, if you want to dive into the methodology of the studies, read the unredacted court records, and hear the raw stories of the men pulling off the Phoenix Protocol for yourself, you are highly encouraged to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy the ebook.
And if you want to keep up with the author's real-time strategies, his offshore asset tips, and his ongoing cultural commentary, make sure to follow at Conrad N. Riker on Substack.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own as you look at the institutions around you. We started by asking, what if the systems are designed to extract your resources? Well, Riker advises the most capable men to completely withdraw those resources, their taxes, their labor, their innovations, and their genetics, to build off-grid parallel empires.
To Sigma Siege.
Exactly. But consider the macro-level consequences. If the top tier of competent men actually succeed in this Sigma Siege, and they take all their infrastructure building skills, their capital, and their physical labor with them, what happens to the modern state? Will the bureaucratic system just quietly and peacefully collapse under its own top-heavy weight? Or, recognizing it is being actively starved of its lifeblood, will the state invent new, unprecedented, and aggressively draconian legal mechanisms to try and force men back onto the plantation? The ultimate question isn't just whether men can walk away, but what the world looks like the morning after they do. Thanks for listening, guys.